Well, about 8 years ago, one of my family members had a heart attack, should have died. His LAD, his coronary artery, was 99% occluded. He had what's called the widowmaker, and he survived. In talking to one of my colleagues about what had happened, they are actually the one that said, "Oh, you should put him on keto." And I looked at them and I said, "What's that?" You know, and just launched into this rabbit hole of what is keto, how do you do it, why does it make sense, and collectively spent probably about 300 hours of just independent research on my own and realized that this makes so much sense from a common sense standpoint. It's almost insane, you know.
What version of the ketogenic diet do you use in your clinic?
Oh, I call it clean keto because a lot of what you'll find on social media, YouTube, and the internet, I call dirty keto. So I think I'm the one that came up with the phrase clean keto because I was getting sick and tired of getting pushback from the other doctors in Hawaii telling me that what I'm teaching them is dangerous. I just wish more people realized that if they just change their eating, they'd do so much better, you know. But to have increased strength is one of the most empowering things that a female can obtain for herself. You know, so not only are you like having more energy and you're healthier and you're losing weight and you're just feeling so much better on a ketogenic diet, when you start to work on your body composition, it just takes you to this next level of just self-love, self-worth, empowerment. And that in and of itself really is what this journey is about for so many people. And what we do in our practice is all of my patients do annual cardiac testing with her. So echocardiogram, treadmill, if their insurance covers it, we do vascular scans and their carotid arteries and things. Because we know for sure that number one, their chemotherapy is going to work better. They might even need fewer treatments and lower doses if they're simultaneously on a ketogenic diet. And the literature supports that. They are for sure going to have less side effects.
Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carbon Fasting. Now, on this channel, I've hosted two doctors of pharmacy before. So one was Corey Jenks from the US, and he told us about how he uses, because he's a stand-up comedian, how he uses some of the techniques used in stand-up comedy to help his patients consider lifestyle interventions. The other one was the pharmacist who gave up drugs or who was shifted from drugs to lifestyle medicine. And that was Graham Phillips, a member of Britain's public health collaboration. So we had a lot of fun with those two pharmacists. The links will be below. Check them out. Today, I'm honored to have another doctor of pharmacy with us from Hawaii this time. She's an extraordinary lady. She runs a clinic in Hawaii, believe it or not, prescribes ketogenic diet as a therapy. She's contributed immensely to the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. She's not only a member, she's a lecturer there. I've met her in person and I've enjoyed her presentation before. Dr. Jodi Nishida, welcome to Low Carbon Fasting.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
How would you like me to refer to you? Jodi, Dr. Jodi? I think Dr. Jodi makes sense, right?
Yeah, most of my patients call me Dr. Jodi.
Yeah, that's easier. Right, Dr. Jodi, how did you come up with the idea of the keto prescription? Being a pharmacist, I don't know of many other pharmacists who even understand what the ketogenic diet is all about. So tell us about your journey right from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, about 8 years ago, one of my family members had a heart attack, should have died. His LAD, his coronary artery was 99% occluded. He had what's called the widowmaker, and he survived. In talking to one of my colleagues about what had happened, they are actually the one that said, "Oh, you should put him on keto." And I looked at them and I said, "What's that?" You know, and just launched into this rabbit hole of what is keto? How do you do it? Why does it make sense? And collectively spent probably about 300 hours of just independent research on my own, and realized that this makes so much sense from a common sense standpoint. It's almost insane, you know. Um, did it on myself as well to help my family member out. And in doing so, it put my own very severe autoimmune condition in remission. And so I have psoriatic arthritis. And at one point, mine was more the arthritis component. It was head to toe. I had been on weekly injections for 13 years. My quality of life was very up and down in terms of dexterity, pain level. It was awful. And I was told I was going to be on medications for the rest of my life. But then keto comes along and I'm feeling like a brand new person. And so I just realized that this approach could help a lot of people. And at the time, there weren't a lot of keto doctors yet, you know. We didn't have any type of accreditation program or anything like that. And I actually met with our Blue Cross Blue Shield plan out here in Hawaii. They are the ones that helped me figure out how to partner with an MD so that legally, per our state laws, I could open this medical practice and do this as a doctor of pharmacy. And my clinic has been flourishing ever since. It's been great.
That's a wonderful story. And
Yeah.
I can kind of testify to that too as a type 1 diabetic. When I first sort of considered keto, all I came across on Google, certainly Google, Dr. Google told me no, type 1 diabetics cannot do keto. When I started listening to Dr. Funk's, Jason Funk's videos, he didn't have
Yes.
books out yet at the time, and he wasn't mentioning type 1. He was talking about type 2 diabetics. There weren't many resources. And then
No.
from Britain, Dr. Ian Lake came out, and he of course has a side sort of practice called keto type 1 keto clinic. So I thought if he's doing it, then I can do it too. But now we've come a long way. I'm so
Yeah.
happy, especially in the type 1 realm. We've come such a long way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Do you know R.D. Dykeman?
Yes, I've interviewed him just a couple of, in fact, he's been on my channel twice. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, his son even spent a day shadowing me in my practice a couple months ago because his son's going to be a doctor too.
It's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. So if I were to ask you to give me kind of a general classic profile of the kind of patients that come
Yeah.
your way, what would you say? Would you say the common link is maybe insulin resistance?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started my practice, I thought innocently, naively, I thought I was just going to be teaching people how to eat. Oh, no, no. I mean, this has definitely evolved, of course, within the scope of my practice legally, but we are seeing everything, every medical condition from head to toe. And as we know, as metabolic health practitioners, insulin resistance is definitely the common thread between all of them. For me, every day is different. I have very cancer heavy days where I'm seeing all types of different cancers. I have kids with severe epilepsy. Sadly, adolescents and teens with diabetes already and hormonal imbalance issues, tons of diabetics, people that are trying to stay off of dialysis, fatty liver, perimenopause. I mean, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune, it's everything. And it's getting harder and harder in that we get the patients that have tried the Western medicine approach, sometimes for decades. They've seen all types of different doctors. They've had all the testing done. They've had numerous surgeries. They've been tried on multiple medications and still are not healthy, right? And by the time they come to us, they feel beat up, they are frustrated, they are deflated and defeated. We are dealing with carb and sugar addiction to varying degrees, which is such an important part of their therapy. We have people that don't know how to cook, have never exercised a day in their life. And so I have found that I can honestly only see 12 patients a day and do a good job with every single one of them because you're helping them on so many levels, you know?
You mentioned the number of conditions. I will circle back to that in a minute, but I just wanted to know why is it that you only use ketogenic diet, or what? So how do you define it?
Well,
Dr. Westman has a phrase. He says the internet keto version, and then there's Dr. Westman version. So, what version of the ketogenic diet do you use in your clinic?
Oh, I call it clean keto because a lot of what you'll find on social media, YouTube, and the internet, I call dirty keto. So I think I'm the one that came up with the phrase clean keto because I was getting sick and tired of getting pushback from the other doctors in Hawaii, telling me that what I'm teaching them is dangerous, assuming that I'm telling people to eat bacon and pork rinds all day, which is not at all what I do. Um, I think it's important for listeners to understand that there's no standard set keto template. Eric Westman's program is different from mine, is different from Dr. Cho, is different. We are in different parts of the country. We have different, ethnicities that we work with. And so, I believe that we've all really fine-tuned and tailored it to our geographic region, which is important, right? Keto, I think, can be used interchangeably with low carb. And what I do is I really have to tailor it to each patient. So I believe there's a spectrum. Okay. And on one end is keto, clean keto, and the other end is carnivore. And each of my patients will fall somewhere on this spectrum, depending on what their metabolic and health needs are. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and we do total carbs. Everyone will fall somewhere under 25 grams of total carbs a day. I do not believe in net carbs. I've seen disasters with that approach. And so, yeah.
When I was eating carbs, so the recommendation was, hey, you have a ratio of how much insulin to take to cover carbs. The magic formula that never ever works, but we were told to count total carbs, and I was a master of carb counting, by the way. So when we talk about carb counting, I was a master of carb. I could count absolutely precisely, and yet the insulin never ever matched my carb count. So that's just a side story for type 1. I always bring in the type 1 stuff because that's just so close to my heart. I've been living with it now for 46 years, but so total carbs definitely. I'd like to hear your thoughts on why the net carb doesn't work. In fact, there's something else about total carbs I want to say, but net carbs, so what's wrong with it?
Well, net carbs is total carbs minus fiber or minus sugar, alcohol, and then you arrive at net carbs, right? But so number one, I feel it's a marketing gimmick. for a lot of packaged keto products that, I mean, who even said these things were keto to begin with? That's not a regulated thing yet, right? There's no standard for that. But if that's not how the human body works, you can't just subtract fiber and sugar, alcohol, and your body's going to absorb less sugar. And the way that, I had initially tested that out was I just had a bunch of patients, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, no diabetes at all, eat certain foods and then check their blood sugar. Because if the net carbs thing was true, then their blood sugar should barely move, right? And it was fascinating because what I found was that an item, or if someone thought they were eating maybe 30 net carbs a day, depending on what they ate, they could be consuming close to 100 total carbs a day without realizing it. And especially here in America, people need to understand that the base ingredients that we use in our food products and our processed foods are of such lower quality than other countries that all of this agricultural practices, all of this actually comes into play. And so that's why I don't subscribe to net carbs.
Now, for me, it's been 2 years since I was in the UK last. We've been on the move, we've been traveling for work, etc. But we don't have, in the UK, we don't have as much variety of keto products, keto marketing. I mean, it really didn't exist 2 years ago. So I don't particularly recall how they would put in the nutritional sort of labeling where they would have put sugar alcohols, for example. But kind of part of me is thinking that they probably did not include it in the total carbs. Here in the US, the sugar alcohols are included in the total carbs. So that also gets confusing because I coach type 1 diabetics and they say sugar alcohol is 70 grams of carbohydrate, but most of it is sugar alcohol. So am I injecting for 70 grams? I look at the ingredients. No, there's just no carbs in there. That's just the sugar alcohol that's counted in as part of the total carbs, like something like allulose or erythritol. So I think, it's important, I'm sure you agree with me, to teach patients how to read labels, right? And check ingredients lists.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have 120 different names for sugar now in our food industry in the US. But the thing that people don't realize is everyone is at a different level of insulin resistance based on the last however many years of their life that they've been alive, what they've consumed, how much they have or haven't exercised, their stress level, their fat percentage on their body, their genetics. All of these things are going to affect your degree of insulin resistance. And so, if you had 10 net carbs, I'm just throwing out random numbers, and your blood sugar went to 104, but I had the same amount of net carbs and my blood sugar went up to 140, right? That's where the individual degree of insulin resistance comes into play. And I have now seen over 3,000 patients. I would say 1,000 of them tried keto on their own at some point, right, off of social media or whatever. And 100% of them were doing it wrong. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of marketing gimmicks. The education and the information on ingredients in and of themselves evolve every single year. That's why it's so important for all of us to try to attend at least one of these medical conferences a year, because that's where some of this valuable information tends to come out. I mean, just my own food list that I give to my patients at their second appointment, that has evolved probably 4 times in the last 5 years. Something we thought was safe is no longer safe to eat, for various reasons. And so, but that's the beauty of it, is that it evolves, because too many doctors are robotically practicing medicine the way they learned it 10 to 40 years ago, and they have not evolved. The only thing that's evolved is testing and medications.
Beautiful point. Let's talk about testing and medication. So I'm sure you use medications because lifestyle sometimes is not enough. So what are some of the common medications that your patients use? Let's
Okay,
start
so
with diabetes, for example. Let's start with diabetes.
yeah, okay, so by law, a doctor of pharmacy cannot prescribe diabetes meds. Patients come to me on medications for diabetes from their PCP or their endocrinologist. My job is to fine tune it, and my job is to help them get off of their meds. I don't manage diabetes, I reverse it, type 2, right? Um, so to clarify, we don't put anyone on anything. And I have a lot of inquiries about, do you use GLP-1s? Do you use Ozempic or Manjaro? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. I teach you how to eat and I get you off your medications. And so if that is of interest to you, then I'm the doctor for you. But if you want to stay on meds, you got to go to your regular doctor for that. So we actually we don't prescribe anything.
So in order to de-prescribe, do you have to closely communicate? I'm just trying to get into logistics of it. So do you have to closely communicate with their GP, for example?
Mm-hmm.
So they
I,
can
yeah,
prescribe, or can you do the de-prescribing yourself or reducing the dose?
yeah. So I always send notes to their physician, because, we all use the same electronic health record systems, but, especially if someone is symptomatic, right? And I have diabetes patients checking their blood sugar at least once a day. You'd be shocked. 99% of them come to me. They're not even checking their blood sugars at the right time, right? They are almost never told to check a postprandial sugar. And I'm like, if that's half of your A1C reading, we need to know what that looks like. We need to know how different foods are affecting your blood sugars. It's just mind-boggling how the medication regimen that they come to me on and the blood sugar testing regimen that they come to me on makes absolutely no sense. And so patients will start to do well within the first 1 or 2 weeks, right? And so early on, within the first month, we're having to adjust their medications down based on symptoms of hypoglycemia. So I'll usually tell them to bump it down a little, and I'll just send a note to their doctor, letting them know why I said what I said and what the recommendation was. And then I always just tell the patient, follow up with your doctor as well, just to make sure all three of us are good and we're all on the same page. But, I've been doing this long enough out here where I think most of the docs are comfortable with having me do that and they understand why it needs to be done.
How about CGMs? Are they
Yeah.
are they prescribed to everyone or only to diabetics?
It just depends on the person. Of course, there's immense value in it. Um, do they want to pay for it? Because it might not be covered by their insurance, depending on their diagnosis. Very few are willing to do that. But as often as possible, we'll either put someone on a Freestyle Libre or just have them do an old school glucometer. We have a bunch of people that use the Keto Mojo because for certain diagnoses, I do very closely follow their glucose ketone index. And so we use a variety of tools for that.
Right. So that's kind of diabetes. We touched on that. So what happens to patients with fatty liver disease? What version of ketogenic diet? Because people assume, all right, so if I have fatty liver disease, I should avoid eating butter and other sources of sort of fats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't understand where that fat has come from. So let's talk about the fatty
Yeah.
liver disease and some of the success stories. that you've seen in your patients?
Yeah. Fatty liver, like you said, is very common. That is actually an easy patient for me. I can reverse fatty liver in 3 months in someone. Their keto diet is not different from any of my other patients. It's exactly the same. Everyone starts at exactly the same starting point, and then based on their subsequent visits, that is when and how I figure out how I need to tweak things. I typically don't repeat labs until someone has solidly been on my program for 3 months. And like I said, usually by then we're seeing a huge improvement, if not a reversal in fatty liver. I say it takes 3 to 6 months, but for me, that's an easy patient because I get really hard patients, really hard, like metastatic cancers and severe diabetes where they have been in some form of chronic kidney disease and had no idea. Like their doctor never even told them for years. You know, the patients that I get, 75% of them, they're at a point of desperation, honestly, because they feel they've tried and failed everything else. So
The
yeah.
problem is, of course, they haven't received advice that works.
No. No, one of my favorites is like the doctor will tell them, oh, you should go plant-based with zero detail on what plant-based is, right? And it's just so sad that more physicians haven't embraced this as a legitimate medical approach. That's why I feel I honestly wish all the non-licensed medical the all the influencers on social media that do not have like some form of a medical license, they need to get off. Like they need to do all of us a favor and just get off of social media because they are the ones that are muddying the waters for us. You and I know that this could literally save millions of lives in a relatively short amount of time. But then they muddy the legitimacy of this, right? And that's why, like, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners is so important because, in an effort for us to do studies properly and publish properly in journals and have our medical conferences, which are not sponsored by Big Pharma, not even a penny, and do the work that we do, that is what is going to, I think, really help move this forward as a legitimate medical approach where more doctors will be willing to partner with us because the truth is they should be sending every single one of their patients to one of us, in my opinion. People would do so much better.
I agree. It's just sad that there isn't, most physicians aren't embracing this as at least as an intervention. Maybe not the only one, but at least as an effective intervention because let's face it, there is enough medical literature on the ketogenic diet to support its use.
There's tons. Yeah, you're right. There's tons.
In
the US, it's going to be interesting to see, I'll just briefly say this and then we can move on. What is going to transpire over the next 4 years here, just with RFK Jr. as head of our HHS down here, where he's going to try to clean up big food. He's going to try to fight big pharma on certain things, get the ranches up and running again, even the small family farms, solve our polluted, contaminated soil problem. I mean, there's just so many levels to this that affect health. As a society, all we do is like, we just turn to medications so quickly, but there's so much more that can be done before we reach that point.
I mean, as an outsider, who's really not involved in American politics, who's never really taken that much interest, I'm very hopeful that some positive changes will come through this time.
Me too.
Even if all the talk, even if 10% of all the talk has been achieved, that's still big. That's still big because there is so much to fix.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And he's up against huge corporations with very deep pockets that are very interested in protecting their financial interests, right? At the expense of our health. And, the onus falls on us too, the the people, the citizens, is we need to stop patronizing the businesses that are making us sick. Like, let's just all decide to stop going to McDonald's and Starbucks. Seriously, because these are two huge companies that are contributing to the demise of our health. Um, let's all get off our meds. You know what I mean? Like, it really, half of it falls on us. Let's stop buying fast food. Let's start supporting our local farms and ranchers. Like, little things like that. It's going to take that type of effort too, in my opinion.
I completely agree. It is a two-way sort of.
Mhm.
We're responsible
We
for
are.
what we do to improve or destroy
We
our
are.
health too. That's correct. I completely agree because businesses will, at the end of the day, businesses will respond to public demand. And, if
Yep.
if the demand for junk food isn't big enough, they're going to
Yep.
reconsider their recipes. And that's how businesses evolve and keep on making money. Um, let's move on. Let's move on to, so we mentioned that the fatty liver, which is relatively easy to reverse. You can see
Yeah.
improvement in, less than 3 months, maybe. So diabetes, again, fairly easy to reverse. Oh, by the way, Dr. Jodi's socials will be below. Please visit her everywhere, but particularly the Instagram page, because she posts, you post the same on Facebook as well. She posts some success stories of her patients with the patient's permission, of course. And you can see their before and after photos, and even sometimes photos just leave such a big impression. And you think, if this person
Yes.
did that, then maybe I can
Yep.
too.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to be posting a real touching one on Saturday morning from one of my breast cancer survivors, and I I just wish more people realized that if they just change their eating, they'd do so much better, you know, and on my social media, I really try to show tidbits of my life as well. Because, health is not just your eating, it's your stress management, it's your level of joy, it's how you're exercising, it's relationships, it's all of these things affect your health. And like I said, when I first started, I naively thought I would just be teaching people how to eat. I didn't realize I was going to become their psychologist in many ways, their addiction counselor in many ways, but that is honestly what it takes to help someone get healthy today.
You're doing such a fabulous job. I mean, you inspire me. So if
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
tired, I visit one of your pages and just check your posts, and I think she's on the roll. Dr. Jodi's on the roll. There's no stopping her. I'm envious of your energy. I truly am. So thank you for all the good work that you're doing.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
helping,
thanks for that.
you're helping us coaches too.
Yeah. Well, we're all part of the ripple effect, and it's one person at a time. I don't, I'm almost 52. I don't think we're going to see huge shifts in guidelines or anything, or a giant cleaning up of everything that's corrupt in medicine in our lifetime. But I do think it's exciting that you and I are part of that huge initial movement, because that's going to be our legacy someday, right?
I
Isn't that one of
agree.
the big reasons why we do what we do? You know, it's just to truly help people. So yeah, you're important too.
Ah, thank you so much. I was going to mention my type 1 group, private group, because I wanted to do fasting as a type 1 diabetic. Again, there was no information online. If anything, it was, type 1, but not medical literature, but
No.
just posts from people, oh, type 1 shouldn't fast. And so I decided I'm gonna fast anyway, because if I can't find any valid reasons in PubMed stopping me from fasting, then I should fast. Of course, there were warnings about insulin reduction and possible ketoacidosis, even with normal blood sugars, in the
Mm,
absence or in the presence of too little insulin. So I was aware of all of that.
mhm.
Um, and I wanted to fast anyway. I thought I'll create a group, private group. I'll share my experience. I wrote a blog about it too. This was 4 years ago. And I thought if just one other person joins and hears, what
Yeah.
I did, and now there are hundreds and hundreds of people all either
Yeah.
fasting. It doesn't have to be extended fast, but people, just stop snacking. That's fasting too. If you're fasting 6 hours, 8 hours, I consider that fastings too, because your
Right.
insulin levels are going down. You're giving the chance to your body to heal. But yeah, I think this movement is definitely growing.
Yeah. It's exciting because it's so positive.
It is
Yeah.
positive. It is. It's absolutely positive. And it really, I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about how much we've come along and how much we've grown. Dr. Jodi, so weight loss? I've noticed some of your pictures, significant weight loss. How does that happen? Do people focus on the weight, or you just address the health and then the weight loss just comes along?
I try to get them to focus on health first, right? Healing the body from the inside out with food is my saying. And I tell them, you're going to lose weight on my program. If you do what I say, you're going to lose weight. But I also get them to focus more on inches. So
Yeah.
we do a very big focus on inches of fat loss. My patients do measurements because I really try to teach them about being in ketosis, right? The human body can only run on two fuel sources, sugar or ketones. You want to run on ketones as your fuel. And if you do that, you'll constantly just burn your own body fat for fuel. And that's how we go like this, you know? And I think the other important thing is to set expectations properly. We are, in a sense, competing against drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro, where some people are losing 30 pounds a month. And explain to people that that is not a normal or healthy rate of weight loss. Depending if you're male or female, you can expect to lose 4 to 12 pounds a month on keto. It depends if you're exercising or not. And I always tell them that you will lose more inches always than you will pounds. But inches are what matter because inches are what everyone around you sees. Only you see the number on the scale. So there's this whole mental, psychological process of getting people to be unfixated on the scale moving forward. And I have to tell people, do not weigh yourself every day, you know, and do not view a plateau in your weight loss that can last sometimes up to 2.5 weeks as it's not working anymore. I'm failing. I'm doing something wrong. Because plateaus are actually a normal part of weight loss on a scale. Your weight loss kind of does this and then it'll do this and sometimes it'll do that. And it's like bonkers, right? And I tell them, but if you measure, your measurements will always do a very linear line down like this. So psychologically, it's so much better for people. But yeah, you lose weight on keto for sure.
So what measurements do you take around the
Oh,
belly?
no. I have a whole sheet that I have my patients fill out. So we do neck, we do upper arms, chest, waist, hips, thighs, above the knee, and calves.
Above the knee. All right.
Mhm. Yeah. And so we do all of those areas, and I teach them to just do their measurements once a month, every 4 weeks. And my average patient will lose 8 to 12 inches off of their body every single month. But I also teach my patients how to exercise and how to do weights. Weight training is also part of my program because doing weights is the best way to reverse insulin resistance.
Yes. Why? Why
Mhm.
is that?
Oh, it's just because insulin resistance primarily lives in your muscles, right? And so the simplest way to explain it, and Dr. Ben Bokikio, he gives the best talks on this topic of how and why, with all the different signaling and muscle fibers, insulin resistance lives here. But what I simply tell my patients is, if I'm telling you insulin resistance lives here, you basically have to, you're like squeezing it out of your muscles, you
Mm.
know? And what we do in my practice is we identify and we focus on all the major muscle groups because I say if the larger a muscle group is, for example, your bicep is only this big versus your quads or your hamstrings are a lot bigger, the more surface area a muscle group has, you can imagine the more insulin resistance lives there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because those muscles, muscle cells at least, will suck up some of the glucose as well, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah. So weight training, honestly, in all my years of doing this and in my own personal experience too, people should be spending 70% of their time doing weights and about 30% of their time doing cardio. And I try to get my patients to do a minimum of 3 times a week.
that's what I do. I'm pleased. This is what I do. So I don't do anything
Good.
differently. I do weights and I do. Interestingly, for me, you see, everyone posts before and after photos. I look healthy. I look healthier, but I'm exactly the same weight. So, most
Yeah.
success stories, people lose weight, right? If anything, I've kind of gained around because I have muscle now. I'm
Muscle.
doing
Exactly.
weightlifting. Whereas 6 years ago, when did I start this? 2015. So, oh my goodness, 9 years ago. So, 9 years ago, I didn't have as much muscle mass on me,
Yes.
and I had a wider waistline. In fact,
Uh-huh.
that's where I started noticing the fat melting away. I think that's the best way to
Mm-hmm.
describe it. And then one day I stood in front of the mirror. I thought, oh my goodness, I do actually have a waistline because I couldn't see it before. I never was
Yeah.
overweight. I was never overweight. I'm the same weight now, but
Yep.
I'm healthier, I'm stronger, I'm more fit, and I do have a waistline. Yeah, that's
Yeah. So
wear a
body
bikini for the
composition.
it's the
Yeah,
body
body
composition.
composition is everything, and that's another reason why we have to stop obsessing about the scale, is because once you start to build muscle, the scale is going to go up because muscle weighs more, but you look phenomenal. I tell my women the goal is lines, to start to get lines, in your arms, in your core, on the outside of your leg. After they've been with me for a while, our conversation changes and we start to talk about very specific goals like that for them because I'm still trying to push body composition on them in addition to their food.
I think that's
Yeah.
really important. It's not about the
Mm-hmm.
scale. It really is about improving your body composition. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, if I think too hard about it, it brings tears to my eyes that for the first time ever in my entire life, I was able to wear bikini and a decent looking one, nothing too revealing, but still a bikini that I'd never ever worn. At 50, I wore my first bikini
Wow.
at 50. I was so self-conscious, even though I never was big. I never was over.
Yeah.
I was so self-conscious. I would wear grandma one-piece bodysuits with the biggest
Uh-huh.
loose t-shirts on top. Now I'm confident. And you know, that's worth it. Not to mention
Yes.
the blood sugar management, everything else, but
Yes.
that to me, to be confident and healthy and fit at 50 is just worth it.
Well, that's a thing, right? Because it's about empowerment, and for women, especially because we tend to shy away from doing weights. I think for many of us, we're like, oh, but if I do weights, I'm going to be like big and bulky, like Sean Baker. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, 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 no. There, you want to be lean and toned, right? But to have increased strength is one of the most empowering things that a female can obtain for herself. So not only are you like having more energy and you're healthier and you're losing weight and you're just feeling so much better on a ketogenic diet, when you start to work on your body composition, it just takes you to this next level of just self-love, self-worth, empowerment. And that in and of itself really is what this journey is about for so many people. Is what they really don't realize. I know this coming in as they walk into the door as a new patient. They think, oh, they're just here to reverse their diabetes or lose 20 pounds or whatever. What they really don't realize is this is about getting them to this place of self-love, self-worth, and empowerment, because actually today so few people have it, Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. I wish we were ending with that conversation. However, I do want to come back to some of the more serious conditions you mentioned,
Okay.
like cancer or even chronic kidney disease.
Mm.
Can you tell me about the other doctors who work, because you have the other doctors who work at your clinic or you work with them. So one of them is a cardiologist, right?
Yes.
But let's talk about the other doctors and what their input is.
Okay. So my overseeing physician, she's an interventional cardiologist. So she's the one that if she gets called to the hospital, she's going to put a stent in you if you're having a heart attack and your arteries are clogged. That's what she does. Um, and it's interesting. So she still feels legally tied to the cholesterol guidelines of your LDL's got to be as close to 70 as possible or below. Whereas I'm telling people, hey, if your insulin and your blood sugar's normal and everything looks good, I don't care if your LDL is 190. You're metabolically healthy, in my opinion. So she believes in my program very much. She herself does it to some degree. I would say she's 80% keto on any given day. And what we do in our practice is all of my patients do annual cardiac testing with her. So echocardiogram, treadmill, if their insurance covers it, we do vascular scans and their carotid arteries and things. And this is valuable because what I have been able to show is that year over year on my program, regardless of LDL, it doesn't matter if your LDL is 70 or 250, everyone's cardiovascular health improves on my program. Reversal of heart failure, reversal of plaque buildup. We've got healthier left ventricular function, better treadmill performance, reversal of arrhythmias. And I mean, there's a whole gamut of improvements that we see. And so for that reason, because she knows I'm very laser focused on reversing insulin resistance, improving blood sugars, she leaves me alone. So my patients are walking in because we order labs and their LDL is like 150, 210. She's learned over the last 5 or 6 years to just let it go. But we will recommend a low dose statin if they have severe diabetes, like a high A1C, because the sugar confounds how the LDL behaves, right? And so our agreement is if their diabetes is still severely uncontrolled, if we can just have them on a low dose statin until I can get their A1C down, and then eventually we take them off.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Mhm.
So what kind of interventions do you do with the cancer patients? Now that's a whole different world, and I would think a cancer patient is probably the most desperate
Yes,
of them all.
yes. Well, it's the same thing, right? What we're trying to do with them is get them to cut way, way back on their carbohydrate, sugar, and seed oil intake. Just reduce the amount of chemicals that they might be consuming through a clean ketogenic diet. Some of them actually go all the way to carnivore because we know for sure that number one, their chemotherapy is going to work better. They might even need fewer treatments and lower doses if they're simultaneously on a ketogenic diet. And the literature supports that. They are for sure going to have less side effects. And that in and of itself is so nice for people just by having them cut back on their sugar, right? So I'm the one teaching them how and what to eat. But after all of this is said and done, it's so important for them, I mean, everyone, but especially them to stay on keto so that their cancer never returns. You know, I just did a video about this in my story on social media, and I was talking about how just because of the sheer number of environmental toxins that we are exposed to on a daily basis, most people don't realize this. You have to walk around and conduct your life as if you have cancer cells. Point blank. It's very simple. It's unavoidable, in my opinion. So, are you going to feed those cancer cells by eating sugar, or are you going to starve them? Because you can assume that you have cancer cells. That doesn't mean you have cancer. That doesn't mean you have a tumor, but you do have cancer cells. And so you don't want to feed them because if you keep feeding them, they're going to spread, right? And I just think that's such a simple premise that I think people need to hear and embrace because cancer to me is the scariest thing. It's the scariest thing that you can be diagnosed with, and it is just so prevalent. And 90% of the oncologists do not embrace a ketogenic lifestyle. And it's mind blowing to me
They don't
because their
understand.
patients would be doing so much better.
They don't understand it.
But you know, at this point in the game, there's no excuse for that, in my opinion. It's not hard.
Yeah.
And they don't have to learn it. But again, there's like one of us in every state at this point in time in the US. Refer your patients, even for just 3 appointments. There's so much they could learn in 3 appointments. It's going to make it go so much better for them, right? And so, yeah, the cancer is serious. And I've seen every cancer from head to toe. Um, at this point in time, I've only lost 2 patients to it. One was a tiny, tiny lady, and she was getting her chemotherapy at the local military hospital. Even though she also had regular insurance, and I kept telling her they are overdosing you. They are overdosing you based on your weight. I did the calculation myself. You have to go outside to a civilian doctor and get a second opinion. It was too late. She was overdosed and she died from her chemotherapy. The second person that passed, he had glioblastoma. So that very rare, very aggressive form of brain cancer. But we were able to give him 2 additional years on his life when his initial prognosis was only 3 to 4 months. And so, yeah, his family was very grateful for that.
To my audience, I'm going to put a link to the interview with Andrew Scarborough from the UK, who had a similar condition, and his prognosis was also about 2 to 3 months, and 10 years on, he's still thriving.
Good.
I'll put that interview link below as well. Dr.
Good.
Jodi, I cannot thank you enough for accepting my invitation. Before we wrap this up, I really want to know what you're talking about in the next SMHP conference. You are one of the speakers.
Oh,
Are you one of the
yeah,
speakers
I'm one
about
of the
women's health?
speakers. Yeah, we're having a dedicated day one is dedicated to women's health. And so my topic is specifically on endocrine disruptors. And just I'm going to try to focus on the larger environmental toxins that are very negatively affecting everyone's health in terms of hormonal balance or imbalance and cancer potential, including things like heavy metals, which people don't realize how many different sources of heavy metals there are in our food and our environment these days. And so that's what I'm going to be speaking on that day.
Now I understand why you grow your own, or at least some of your own vegetables, and you have your own
Yeah,
chickens.
exactly. I'm so scared.
That's the way to go, because you know exactly what you're feeding them and what your
Yeah.
soil quality is. I wish I could be there, but for my audience, if anyone can head to Boca Raton in January 2025.
Yeah.
Look up on the website. I'll put the website link below as well, and you can meet Dr. Jodi in person. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you, Nayiri. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.